The U.S. presidential election has raised serious concerns among Chinese business owners, as Trump promised during his campaign to impose tariffs of 60% to 100% on imports from China. While the election was still ongoing in the U.S., China already sprung into action. Many businesses and factory workers were pulling late nights and working overtime, with factories rushing to ship out products, all in hopes of getting their goods out before Trump officially takes office.
It's 11:30 p.m. now, and we're still loading folding wardrobe doors for the North American market. The shipping schedule is already expedited, and workers are putting in overtime. Running a factory is getting harder and harder. The only thing that's still decent is export trade, but if Trump takes office, even this will become difficult. The future doesn't look too optimistic for the next few years.
If Trump takes office in November, many factories in China will face a shortage of orders. If he adds a 20% tariff, how are we supposed to keep going? It's nearly impossible. Many factories, especially in industries like textiles and clothing, are already looking at Africa as a new option. They see it as a better opportunity, since if Trump comes in, many companies will shift to Southeast Asia and Africa. Some exporters have stated that if they don't ship goods now, they might not be able to ship later. Some businesses received notices from clients asking to pause shipments shortly after Trump's election win. According to data from China's General Administration of Customs on November 7th, China's exports in October rose by 12.7% to $309 billion. This growth rate was far above the 2.4% increase in September and exceeded forecasts from both Wind and Reuters. The export figure for October marked a two-year high, drawing public attention. Data shows that China's exports to the U.S. increased by 8.1% last month, while exports to Europe rose by 12.7%. Analysts believe that while the outlook of the U.S. election remained uncertain, Trump's tariff strategy already unsettled Chinese factory owners and officials, with an estimated impact of around $500 billion in annual exports. To minimize losses, Chinese business owners have acted quickly, accelerating the export of inventory to major markets. Some economists are calling this inventory transfer. With Trump's sweeping victory, China received what it saw as the worst possible news. His commitment to impose tariffs on Chinese goods now hangs like a sword over China, making President Xi Jinping uneasy. This threat puts pressure on Xi's growth model, which focuses on boosting manufacturing and lifting China's economy through exports. Alongside rushing shipments to North America, some merchants worry that Trump's presidency might not overlook the close cooperation between China and Russia. They're also seizing the chance to ship to Russia. Reports indicate that China's exports to Russia reached a record high of $11.25 billion in October, growing 24.4% from the previous year, marking the fastest rate since last November. Clearly, a wave of early export orders surged in China before the fourth quarter, as the prospect of Trump's threats became increasingly real. In June this year, the U.S. Treasury announced a significant expansion of secondary sanctions against Russia. Under this plan, any foreign financial institution conducting transactions with sanctioned Russian entities would be viewed as directly cooperating with Russia's military-industrial base. In September, former NATO General Secretary Jens Stoltenberg publicly warned China that if it continued to fuel the Ukraine, it would inevitably harm its own interests and reputation. On October 1st, NATO's new Secretary General, Mark Rutte, reiterated that China had become a decisive supporter of Russia's aggression in Ukraine. He cautioned that China would need to bear the consequences of supporting Russia. However, China seemed largely indifferent. On October 16th, at a summit of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization in Islamabad, Pakistan, China and Russia announced plans to deepen cooperation in areas like trade, investment, and food security. In late October, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi met with Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Andrei Rudenko in Beijing. During the talks, Wang Yi reaffirmed that the solid relationship between China and Russia would remain unaffected by international changes. Experts observing the US-China relationship believe that if Trump returns to the White House, it could spell trouble for China, as Trump would likely address trade issues with China to tackle various unresolved domestic and international challenges. Prominent Chinese democracy activist Wei Jingsheng wrote that after 4 years of reflection and preparation, Trump has become more focused and organized. He could take stronger actions than before, with potentially greater impact. The New York Times commented that over the past year, the US and China have attempted to manage their rivalry, creating the impression that tensions between the two superpowers wouldn't escalate into conflict. However, Trump's pending return to the White House could disrupt this delicate balance. As a politician, Trump is known for his unpredictability. At one point, he even praised China's top leader, Xi Jinping, calling him a terrific person. However, public opinion generally believes that the Chinese government got a taste of Trump's approach during his first term, and regardless of what he says, Trump intends to engage in even fiercer competition with China. The Chinese Communist Party has reason to feel uneasy about the future, especially since both major U.S. political parties agree on countering China. Although Trump initiated a trade war and increased support for Taiwan, President Biden has largely continued this approach during his administration. Over the past few years, though, Xi Jinping has grown bolder. To push back against the Biden administration, China has not only accused the U.S. of unfairly restraining and pressuring it, but also claimed that the U.S. and its Asian allies are deepening security ties, restricting China's access to advanced chips and other American technologies, and using sanctions to punish China's trade with Russia. Since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Xi has publicly expressed China's no-limits partnership with Russia, backing it up with actions that support Russia's war efforts. When U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan in 2022, China issued military threats that heightened tensions within the U.S. military. Following strengthened U.S.-Taiwan ties, China ramped up military exercises around Taiwan, including a recent large-scale drill simulating a blockade around the island. At the start of 2023, China also carried out a series of provocative actions, including sending a surveillance balloon over U.S. airspace. Now, as the U.S. election draws to a close, China is feeling the pressure and preparing for the uncertainty of a new American administration. First, in recent months, China has been making efforts to appease American allies and partners. For instance, China made significant concessions by reaching an agreement with India to ease border tensions. China also welcomed high-ranking officials from the UK and Japan to Beijing. Additionally, China lifted import restrictions on major Australian products like wine and lobster. According to sources close to Beijing's decision-makers, the Chinese leadership is considering lowering tariffs, offering visa waivers, increasing investments, and other incentives for America's allies in Europe and Asia. These steps aim to mitigate potential economic impacts on China and attempt to drive a wedge between U.S. allies, potentially isolating the U.S. Additionally, in recent months, China removed visa requirements for travelers from about 20 countries, including Australia, New Zealand, Denmark, Finland, and South Korea. China did not ask these nations to implement reciprocal measures immediately. In the month leading up to the U.S. election, China's state media took a noticeably pro-Trump stance, seemingly as an effort to curry favor with him. China has also doubled down on its efforts to achieve technological independence, investing billions of yuan in the development of domestically produced semiconductor chips. At the same time, China continues to strengthen its military, frequently showcasing its latest weapons to the world. To boost his presence on the global stage, Xi Jinping made a point of inspecting China's elite airborne troops on the day of the U.S. election. This unit has received training for a Taiwan liberation mission. Public opinion suggests that while China withstood the challenges of Trump's first term and the Biden administration, it may struggle to withstand a second Trump term. Tactics used during the 2018 U.S.-China trade war, such as redirecting trade routes and devaluing currency, might have limited effect now, given China's real estate crisis and weak consumer confidence. Facing a potential new round of trade conflict, China has fewer countermeasures available. China is trying to adjust its approach to prepare for a Trump victory. However, the European Union has grown increasingly tough on Beijing in recent years, now further irritated by China's support for Russia in the Russia-Ukraine war. sees this as a serious threat to its own security. Meanwhile, U.S. allies in Asia, which include Japan, South Korea, and the Philippines, are becoming increasingly wary of their assertive neighbor. As a result, China's new measures are considered unlikely to be effective. China's apprehension towards Trump is evident in even the smallest actions. On the eve of the U.S. election, a Chinese state-owned short video platform posted a video on Weibo titled, "A Money-Burning Game? One video to understand where all the U.S. election money went." This video criticized the American electoral system. However, once Trump's victory was confirmed, the video was removed, and by the evening of the 6th, CCTV re-uploaded an edited version titled "The Most Expensive Election in U.S. History." Associate researcher Li Chengshu at the National Policy Research Foundation noted that China had already analyzed the two candidates and concluded that Trump's election would be too costly an offense. Thus, they acted quickly to remove the content. Commentators believe that, regardless of how China conducts itself now, its good days are likely over, as Trump is not expected to let China off the hook. Editor-in-chief Hu Ping of Beijing Spring Magazine asserts that a trade war will undoubtedly commence when Trump takes office. Senior political analyst Feng Zhiqiang suggests that, following his election, Trump may initiate a broader economic confrontation with China, involving tariffs, and encouraging the return of manufacturing to the U.S. These actions would make U.S.-China relations not merely an economic exchange between the two countries, but a clash between international alliances. Feng adds that, with the reformation of the Western Democratic Alliance, the U.S. could rally more countries to contain China, further isolating it on the global stage. Following the U.S. election results on the 6th, world leaders rushed to congratulate Trump, with Chinese President Xi Jinping also sending his congratulations on the 7th. However, Xi issued a veiled message to the incoming Trump administration, advising against a new economic war with China. Xi remarked, "History has shown that cooperation benefits both China and the U.S., while conflict harms both." Feng Zhiqiang believes that the likelihood of U.S.-China reconciliation is low, as Trump is expected to adopt an even tougher stance. In early 2018, when Trump imposed tariffs on Chinese goods to pressure Beijing to change its state-led economic practices, China retaliated tit for tat, assuming that this businessman-turned-president would eventually concede. This led to an escalating series of retaliatory actions. During Trump's first term, tariffs on Chinese imports rose from an average of 3% to 12%. However, during the COVID-19 pandemic, American consumers received direct government subsidies, and the significant depreciation of the yuan made Chinese products more affordable abroad. Consequently, Chinese exporters benefited from the strong demand in the U.S. A recent report by economic research firm Geopolitical Dragonomics indicates that China's exports have grown by 60% since 2017, before Trump's tariffs, and China's share in global exports has increased by 2 percentage points. According to some Republican strategists, Trump may start fulfilling his tariff promises upon taking office, focusing on China's failure to comply with the first phase of the 2020 U.S.-China trade deal. This agreement mandated that China increase its purchases of U.S. goods and services by $200 billion over 2 years. Under the deal, the U.S. retains the right to impose additional tariffs if China fails to meet these obligations. Xi Jinping is well aware that Trump's return to office would likely mean penalties for China's non-compliance with the agreement. While China has expressed willingness to engage in dialogue with the new Trump administration, it is also seizing opportunities to strengthen ties with traditional U.S. allies, aiming to buy time and leverage amid intensifying competition with the U.S. In today's U.S. government, there is virtually no partisan divide on China-related issues. Xi's hope of driving a wedge between Europe and the U.S. appears to be wishful thinking, as the U.S. and Europe now share closely aligned views on China. Earlier this year, Chinese trade officials made a final attempt to persuade the European Union to abandon tariffs on electric vehicles made in China. Despite their efforts, the EU raised these tariffs to a maximum of 45.3% this fall, marking one of the EU's toughest recent trade measures. To avoid these tariffs, Beijing has used a mix of incentives and threats with the EU's 27 member states, offering potential new investments while warning of possible tariffs on EU goods. Some analysts suggest that any efforts by Xi Jinping to prepare for Trump's return to the White House would be in vain. To support US-China relations in the coming 4 years, Xi would need to make real concessions on issues like Hong Kong, Taiwan, the South China Sea, and trade deficits. Small gestures won't be enough. Given Trump's strong stance, substantial concessions would be necessary. Otherwise, combined pressure from the US and its allies could overwhelm China. Director of the Institute of International Studies at Fudan University believes that Trump's return would mean stricter technological restrictions on China. Beyond tariffs, Trump might even revoke China's permanent normal trade relations status. International relations professor Wang Yong of Peking University predicts that the U.S. could take further steps to decouple from China, potentially causing significant impact on China's economy. Currently, although China's government has introduced measures to stabilize economic growth, these efforts haven't succeeded in reviving the economy, and investor sentiment remains pessimistic. According to data from China's State Administration of Foreign Exchange, China's direct investment liabilities in its balance of payments fell by $8.1 billion in the third quarter of this year. This indicator, which measures foreign direct investment, dropped by nearly $13 billion in the first 9 months of 2024. Reports attribute the decline in foreign investment in China over the past 3 years to geopolitical tensions, pessimism about China's economy, and fierce domestic competition in sectors like automotive. If this downward trend continues for the rest of the year, it would mark the first annual net outflow of FDI since comparable data began in 1990. Several foreign companies have already reduced their China operations this year, including automakers Nissan and Volkswagen, as well as Konica Minolta. In addition, Nippon Steel announced in July its withdrawal from a joint venture in China, and IBM is closing its research and development department in China, which affects about 1,000 employees. Alan Gabor, chairman of the American Chamber of Commerce in Shanghai, noted that geopolitical tensions are the biggest concern for the Chamber's members, as they make it challenging to plan large investments. Wu Xinbo from Fudan University pointed out that during Trump's first term, Chinese officials may have underestimated him due to unfamiliarity with his approach, but they should be more prepared now for a second term. In a report, Capital Economics China economist Zhu Qinhuang stated, "We expect China's exports to remain strong over the coming months. As for the impact of Trump's tariffs, any drag on China's exports is likely to be felt only in the second half of next year."